What is up, everybody? I'm back here with another Rip Paladin PvP guide. Now I know not a lot has changed since I made my last guide, but for this one I'm going to go more in depth with the talents and glyphs. Also, I'm going to be going over my keybinds and add-ons. Also, this time I'm going to divide into 3 different videos. The first one is going to have talents and glyphs. The second one's going to have gear, stat priority, and rotations. And the third one's going to have add-ons, keybinds, and macros. Now let's get into the talents. Okay, now let's go over tier 45. You can choose between Selfless Healer and Sacred Shield. Sacred Shield is better for comps that are going to purge you a lot, like Turbo or God comp. It just gives you an extra trash buff that they can purge instead of purging something that's actually important. Now for Selfless Healer, I usually use this one almost all the time, even against the comps that can purge me a bunch. I just like it because I can just get a single judgment off and get a fast cast Flash of Light, which can be really helpful. Or if I get the 3 stacks, it can just be a really big crit on one of my teammates and just change the game a bunch. Okay, let's go over tier 60. You can choose between Hand of Purity, Unbreakable Spirit, and Clemency. All are usable in certain matchups. Now for Hand of Purity is good against most dot comps. So whenever there's a lock on the other team, it's usually good to choose it unless it's something like MLS where you have to sack a bunch of CC. I would usually use Hand of Purity. Hand of Purity is really good because say you're playing against a lock comp and they get a haunt off or they're drain soloing a target, you can just Hand of Purity to them to stop pretty much all the damage on them for a bit. Gives your healer a chance to catch up. Now for Unbreakable Spirit, the only time I really like to use Unbreakable Spirit is when I'm playing something like God comp. Their setup is every 30 seconds, so it's really good to have a wall for whenever they have their setup. It's usually better than having the second sack, because if you're running Empowered Seals with Unbreakable Spirit, you can wall and then just run away for the entirety of their CC. Also, it helps to have Bubble on a short cooldown because you can just run away all game and stall up for Bubble. Now Clemency's the one that I use most of the time, and I imagine most people do too, because you get 2 sacks, 2 bops, and 2 freedoms. It's just all around good for most instances. If you say your hero's getting trained, you can give them extra bops or sacks or freedoms to help them get away and stay alive longer. Or if it's a CC heavy comp, you can sack just about all CC, or what you can't get you can usually bop. Or you have the double freedoms, which you can use to either keep up with the person you're hitting, or you can just use it for your teammates to kite away better. Okay, now let's go over tier 75. You can use pretty much all 3 of the talents, just different instances are better for others. Holy Avenger is pretty much good almost all the time, no matter what you're using. It's just really big burst, which is what you expect out of a ret. Also, you can use it to stay alive. You can use it in combination with Executions, which gives you the really big heal plus the hot, which is really helpful. Also, being that you get Holy Power every single hit you get, you can, after every attack, you can walk to keep yourself up. Sanctified Wrath is really good because not only do you have a 30-second burst, but when used with Empowered Seals, you can pretty much use Hammer of Wrath every other global, and it hits really hard because of the damage buff, the Seal of Truth. It's good against comps where you probably need longer burst rather than bigger burst. I personally don't use it often. I usually stick with Holy Avenger and Final Verdict, but that's just me. Now for Divine Purpose. Divine Purpose is pretty good when you're running double DPS in 2s. You can use it with Empowered Seals and just have Seal of Insight on all the time, and you're just proccing heals all the time. You can stay alive against healer DPS comps pretty well with it. Now for tier 90, I pretty much only use Execution Sentence because you can use it for both burst healing and burst damage, while for the other 2, they just aren't as effective in my opinion. It can be really good because if your teammate is really low, you can get a really big heal off, plus the hot keeps them up for after a while, enough to stall out for your healer to get them back up. Now for tier 100, you can choose between Empowered Seals and Final Verdict. Both of them are really good for most instances. I go with Final Verdict most of the time because I just feel like the consistent and burst damage is better than what Empowered Seals puts out. I just feel like Empowered Seals is better for comps that you're trying to stay alive longer. It can be really good against comps like RMD and God comp because Seal of Justice movement speed makes it so you can kite their team really well. While Final Verdict just does a crap ton of damage whenever you need it with the big Final Verdicts plus the Divine Storm procs. But in the end, it's what you prefer. I prefer Final Verdict, other people prefer Empowered Seals. Now let's get into Glyphs. Most of the time with glyphs, you're only allowed to really change one or two of your glyph slots. You're almost going to always have to stick with Glyph of Templar's Verdict all the time, because the extra 10% damage reduction from it is just way too good and you can't really play without it. And most of the time you're going to be stuck with Divine Protection, because if not, all physical damage is just going to chunk you and you have no protection against it. But other than that, you can pretty much choose between any of the other glyphs. If you're going into comp that you're going to have trouble sticking onto your target, I recommend going Burden of Guilt, because the slow can just be really helpful for catching back up, or even keeping your teammate caught up. Against dot heavy comps, you can go with Divine Shield Glyph, because you could be really low and your healer's struggling to keep you up, and then you can just bubble and get the big heal on you, make it a lot easier for your healer. Another one I like to use is Flash of Light. I like to use it in combination with Selfless Healer, so you can get the big Flash of Light hit into an execution sentence for a lot of healing. Now, one of the best glyphs in my opinion is Hand of Freedom Glyph. So whenever you get your freedom onto one of your teammates, it reduces the CC on them for 4 seconds by 25%. So if your healer is getting polyed or something like that, you can, while they're inside of the poly, you can freedom them to reduce the duration of what's left by 25%. Glyph of Word of Glory can be really good if you're going to be walking a lot, because you get both the heal and pretty much a 10% damage buff, so it can be really helpful in some instances. That's about it with glyphs that I recommend using. Most of the other glyphs just aren't worth using most of the time. That is just about it for talents and glyphs. Next time I'm going to be going over gear, stat priority, and rotation. Peace.